Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the April 4th, 2019 State Board of Education meeting. I'm Eric Davis, Chair of the Board, and I call this meeting to order. Welcome to all board members, advisors, staff, on-site visitors, our online listeners, and Twitter followers. I remind the audience and those listening that this body meets monthly with its official meeting scheduled for the first Thursday of the month. Committee meetings were held on Wednesday prior to the official meeting day, as was the case yesterday when the board met to discuss its committee agenda items. And I want to thank Vice Chair Duncan for running what I understand was the best run State Board of Education meeting in some time. So thank you, sir. I remind our on-site visitors and online listeners that you can follow the meeting online and see all of our materials by going to SBE meetings at www.ncpublicschools.org. Board members, you're reminded that it's our duty to avoid conflicts of interest and the appearance of conflicts of interest as we handle the work of this board. Does any member of the board know of any conflict of interest or any appearance of conflict with respect to matters coming before us at this meeting? If so, please state them for the record. And if during the course of the meeting you become aware of an actual or apparent conflict of interest, please bring the matter to the attention of the chair. It will then be your duty to abstain from participating in discussion on the matter and from voting on the matter. At this time, I'll call on my colleague, Mr. Todd Chastain, to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We now come to our special recognitions, a time on our agenda when we recognize significant awards, proclamations, resolutions, and those who make a difference in the lives of North Carolina's public school students every day. April is typically the month we dedicate to receive presentations from student advisors to the board. Since 2017, the student voice and perspective has been missed. Advisors are important to this board, and today we'll hear reflections from two seniors graduating from North Carolina Public Schools, receiving prestigious awards from Wake Forest University and the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. Before the students come forward, I want to share that they have each received full scholarships to attend their respective universities. Mr. Miles Cyrus attends Fike High School in Wilson, North Carolina. He's interested in majoring in biochemistry with plans to attend pharmacy school in the future. Mr. Cyrus received the Joseph G. Gordon Scholarship, which will cover the cost of his tuition, room, board, and allowance of $3,400 per semester to apply to the cost of books, personal expenses, and transportation. Mr. Greer Webb attends Sanderson High School in Raleigh. He has a passion for advocacy and is involved in many efforts to ensure the student voice is heard in many school, community, and political arenas. Greer is currently interning with the board. He's also the founder of several nonprofits and received a Moorhead-Kane scholarship to attend UNC Chapel Hill, where his 4 summers will be fully funded. We'll now hear from these terrific students, and I'll call on Mr. Cyrus to present first, followed by Mr. Webb.
Good morning. And thank you for having me here today. To the board, thank you for this opportunity, and especially to Ms. Deanna Townsend-Smith and Ms. Sneha Shaw-Coltrane for recognizing me and giving me this opportunity. Here we go. All right, so before I delve into the bulk of my presentation, I just want to give you a little bit of my background. I come from Wilson, North Carolina, where I was born, and shortly thereafter, my family moved to Craven County, where I attended Ben D. Quinn Elementary School. Go Craven County. Yes, much love for them. Lived there and studied there until the middle of my 2nd grade year when we moved to Asheville, North Carolina, where I attended Vance Elementary School and Asheville Middle School. After 8th grade, my family moved back to Wilson to complete our full circle of North Carolina, and where I attend Fike High School, and as was mentioned, I will be attending Wake Forest University in the fall. Yes, roll deeks. I was asked to talk today about the major influences that have shaped my career as a student in North Carolina, and I will share them with you. And at the end, I'm going to take a little bit of time to share what I feel can be a way that the board utilizes the student voice in their policy. I can't start any kind of major influences without mentioning my parents. They've been there from the start, day one, in and out, always encouraging me, pushing me to do my best, to be the best version of myself. Being two products of the North Carolina Teaching Fellows program, they had very high expectations for me as a student. But what they did is that they gave me the necessary support to make sure that I met those expectations, which is very critical for students. They need to be held accountable and held to high expectations, but also given the necessary support that they need so that they can meet those expectations. I also want to mention my little sister, who you see in the bottom right and in the middle during Easter. For me, I live and carry myself as a way to be her role model, to be someone she can emulate and follow to make sure that she can be successful in her time as a student. Next, I'm going to cover my pre-K experience, or my early learning experience, which is very crucial for me. And as you can see, I'm there in the middle, in the back, during one of our programs that we put on, Pollocksville Presbyterian Church, where we did pre-K. What I like to think about with pre-K is that it was a very formulative and very structured environment that I had going into kindergarten. And kindergarten is a really true melting pot of different experiences where some students have little to no pre-learning experience, and other students have what I had, where we did presentations, we did Christmas plays, and we even had graduation. So I think that the board should continue to fund and continue to support learning experiences, because those kind of structured environments help students learn what it's like to function away from home, away from their parents, and then alleviates the sharp learning curve that is present in kindergarten when students enter in with little to no experience. Next, I'm going to talk about my teachers. And although I can fill this slide with so many teachers, these are my final four, if you will. Looking throughout all my years, I was like, these four are the fab four, the final four. I'll start with Miss Linden from Craven County at Mindy Quinn. She was my first kindergarten teacher. She was very influential, very powerful in my life. She was always believing in me, and she also catered my learning experience and made it individual, and made it something where I was constantly pushed and challenged to go to the next level. I also remember Miss Linden because during our Christmas special at Mindy Quinn, she was taking pictures of students when they went to sit on Santa's lap. But for me, I hated any kind of mascot. I wouldn't even go near Chuck E. Cheese or Mickey Mouse. I hated them. As we progressed through the line to take the picture, my parents, they were like, "Miles, please just take this picture. We just want to take one picture." They were offering me TV time, ice cream, desserts, anything. It didn't matter. They were like, "Please." And I was like, "No, I'm not going to do it." But as we got to the front of the line, Miss Linden, she says, "Miles, I need you to sit and take a picture." And wouldn't you know it, I just walked right up. So you can see the power that teachers have, especially when they believe in you in the way that Miss Linden did. I'll move next to Mr. Johnston. He's in the top right from Vance Elementary School. He was my first male teacher that I had. He showed me the human side, the sociable side of teachers. Because before then, I thought that teachers were just simply someone who taught you. They were just a figure in the classroom that you were supposed to learn from. I didn't know that teachers could play basketball with you, be the all-time quarterback at recess. I mean, he was doing it all. He sat with us at the lunch table. So that kind of interaction on a social level, not just a learning level, from a teacher was really impactful. Next, in the middle, Mr. Lindsay, my 6th grade math teacher. He made learning so fun. Our 3 classes, we had a fantasy football competition throughout the entire year. And what he did with this is he showed us how to use formulas and functions to calculate our points and show us how math can be applied to real life. And this was incredibly it was mind-blowing that math could be so fun. Next, my other math teacher from middle school, Mr. Holton, 8th grade math. He is one of only 2 African-American teachers that I've had in my K-12 experience, which is a little disheartening for that fact. But learning from someone who looks like me, a strong professional African-American male, was incredibly influential in my growth and development as a student and as a young man. But I also got to have him as a mentor because he was my coach in football and basketball in 8th grade. And what stands out with all these teachers and my other teachers as well is that it was the relationships that we built, the relationships that my teachers had with me, and the kind of learning environment that they fostered. And as the board assesses the criteria that they have for hiring and licensing teachers, I wonder if there's a way that we can measure the kind of relationships that they build and how they can seek to see how a teacher will make those relationships and make those connections with students to foster that positive learning environment. Now I'm going to move to the principals and administrators that I've had. And I want to start with Mr. Gatlin at Vindy Quinn Elementary. He is, in fact, still at Vindy Quinn Elementary. And that picture was taken this past December. My mom and I, who was my assistant principal there at Vindy Quinn, we went back and helped them support families in their efforts to recover and rebuild in the wake of Hurricane Florence. And with Mr. Gatlin, being a young student and coming into my first experience of big school, he was always there with a smile, with a high five, a hug if you needed it, a cheerful good morning. He knew students by name. That kind of love and that kind of atmosphere of you are wanted here, you are safe here, you are part of this family. That kind of attitude was incredibly influential as a young student. And then as I moved to Asheville, I met Miss Sellinger. And when we moved, my parents took me on a tour of all the prospective elementary schools there. And as I was able to meet Miss Sellinger, she kind of displayed that same atmosphere, that same attitude as Mr. Gatlin did. She was there smiling and laughing, her enthusiasm, the way students flocked to her and loved her, that growth and that, you are wanted here, you are welcome. And what's interesting about Miss Sellinger is that she followed me and my class from elementary school into middle school. So I got to have her for another 3 years. And you can see my growth over that time. But she stayed the same. And a lot of her stayed the same in that she still gave that same attitude, that same effort, day in and day out. Now, on the topic of balancing time, I think about middle school and how my involvement in sports began to clash and began to butt heads with my coursework and my classwork. And I was really faced with this experience in 6th grade. I had a project on Egypt, and I let the deadline slip up on me and got overwhelmed. And I ended up staying up really late with my dad, working at his office to print off pictures and type up information, put it on the poster. As we finished up, finally, I don't know what time it was, like 11:30 or so, my dad looks at me as he's shutting down his computer and says, "Don't ever let this happen again, because I'm not going to be staying up this late." And from then on, I've learned how to implement strategies like planning backwards from the due date, setting a to-do list, taking advantage of any spare time that I have to make sure I keep those assignments in front of me and complete them in a timely manner. And with my experience, I learned it kind of brutally and abruptly. But if the board could find ways to implement a policy that helps students learn those strategies early on and throughout their learning career, it sets them up for success later on and in the long term. Now, as I'm on the topic of being involved in sports, as you can see, I've been involved in sports for a very long time. Sports have been a crucial part of my development, both as a student and as a person. They've taught me lessons like being a part of a team, how to work well with others, also being accountable on that team, working towards a goal bigger than myself, and then also taking initiative in classes, because as a student athlete, oftentimes you miss class because you have to go to an away game. So approaching my teachers and saying, "Hey, I'm going to be leaving early this day. What do I need to know? What am I going to miss? What can I do to make it up so I don't get behind?" In sports, those lessons transcend the athletic field and the classroom, and they are applicable to life in general. Also in middle school, I got to experience orchestra and played the string bass. There you see me with the bass in the back. Sorry for the quality of that picture. It was taken from a long ways away. But experiencing orchestra and experiencing the arts in middle school was incredibly influential because it gave me a chance to enjoy my experience, not because it was required or because it was mandatory, but because it was an option. And I was able to pursue it because I was interested in it. And I got to interact and engage with students whom I may not have been able to interact with normally. And so having that setting to interact with a new set of students was really interesting and really fun. Also, Mr. Arango, my teacher here, he was a very powerful and very influential teacher, not just as a musician who helped us and guided us along our way, but also who encouraged us. Because I will let you know that that 6th grade concert, the very first one, it was very, very rough. I think some parents had earplugs in to balance out the screeching. But if you track our growth from that very first concert to our very last concert, you wouldn't have even thought we were the same people. We grew so much as a group, and it was his encouragement and his willingness to stick with us through the tough times that got us there. I also, when examining my involvement in orchestra, think about my sister and how when we moved from Asheville to the eastern part of the state, I ended up having to give up the bass, which I regret. But my sister also will not be able to engage in that kind of activity unless she takes it up herself. So I would wonder if the board could possibly implement policy that encourages this emphasis on the arts and allows students to engage in a more equitable and a more diverse form of arts education that they can pursue because they're interested. Now I move into high school, and some of those teachers that I mentioned, I could fill up the slide with them. And as I meant, there we are doing our heart dissection lab on Valentine's Day this past year. That was pretty ironic. But for me, advanced coursework started in 8th grade, taking NC Math 1 and 8th grade math, way back when you had to take 2 exams at the end of the year, not just 1, which I'm sure classes now will thank you. But it has progressed to honors courses in high school, dual enrollment courses with community college, North Carolina Virtual Public School, IVC courses with the North Carolina School of Science and Math, advanced placement, and of course the International Baccalaureate program. And in this area, the board has had a tremendous impact on me as an individual because they have made these courses available, making dual enrollment courses available with credit transfer, alleviating some of the burden I will face in college, making NCVPS and IVC courses available so I can pursue courses that I'm interested in and explore my passions. And then with advanced placement and International Baccalaureate, giving me college level courses and helping me succeed and get a feel for what it's going to be like when I get to the next level. And while I'm talking about the International Baccalaureate, I want to talk about my relationships with my teachers and how they have really been influential, and they've always been pushing me and encouraging me. And also they've opened up their rooms so I can take advantage of spare time and do homework. They've been at sporting events to support us as athletes. Then also they've helped with writing recommendation letters and essay edits and any kind of help we need. And then you'll notice how big our smiles are in that picture. That's because in our program there are 12 students, and the 11 other students I'm around each and every day will be the ones that I miss the most from my time in high school. Next I will address the clubs that I've been involved in my time in high school. These have been incredibly influential because they just allow me to reach and interact with more students and explore my passions. The biggest ones for me have been the FCA. There is a portion of our club at Bojangles doing our Friday morning devotionals. We meet at 6:30, which can be a bit of a struggle sometimes, but it's worth it. Next is the National Honor Society, where students are honored and recognized for their achievements, and then encouraged to do community service and reach out into their communities. Then I also have the Youth in Government program, sponsored by the YMCA Youth Legislator, where students learn and interact with the legislative and judicial processes. And then finally, the North Carolina Governor's School, specifically Governor's School West, because West is best. I'm a proud alum of the 2018 class. That is our social science group there in that picture. And I'm also a member of the last class to be at Salem College. But I'm especially grateful to the board for their continued support and funding for the North Carolina Governor's School, because that was the biggest and the most influential summer program I've ever been a part of. I was truly changed when I left there, and I grew so much as a person and as a student. Being surrounded by a diverse group of students that are like-minded and like-motivated was incredibly impactful, and I enjoyed it so much, and I can't even put it into words. Now into the final section of my presentation about how the board can utilize the student voice, and I'll address a couple of these. The first thing that I think of is possibly a student advisory board of some kind, where there's a collective and representative group from across the state that meets with the board periodically to discuss certain policies and how they're implemented and what their impact is and how those students are changed because of that policy. Next, some form of information gathering, which can be surveys, a focus group such as the Student Advisory Board, or other sampling techniques. Maybe perhaps a mass email sent to students, because we are a very technological generation. We like anything that we can maneuver with our thumbs. Then after that, I think about when the board convenes and meets in set locations outside of Raleigh to possibly interview students and go into schools to get a feel of how the students are impacted in their day-to-day lives in their own environment would be especially powerful. And then possibly utilizing a setting like this where a student comes to the board and presents his or her reflections on how a certain policy has impacted them. I think about my class specifically and the change in grading scale and the weight of classes for the class of 2019, and then having someone reflect on their opportunities and how they were changed because of that policy. So again, thank you so much for having me, and it was truly an honor and a pleasure. I appreciate all that you have done at DPI, and I think I speak on behalf of my class that even though your work may not be noticed, it is greatly appreciated. I also invite you to follow me on social media, and for any other questions that you may have, I've presented my email. Thank you. So there were possible questions? Okay.
Any questions or comments from my colleagues?
Say again.
Wow.
I'll let you comment.
Mr. Keenan.
Mr. Cyrus, you got me all in chills this morning. I really take to heart the things that you have said, and it just makes me feel good to see a young man start out where you are. And very quickly, I can say you're very blessed.
Yes, sir.
In many ways, and we are blessed by having you this morning. But your blessings, you got two great parents that you talked about.
Yes, sir.
And also you're blessed because you met teachers and other adults who involved in your life to give you support. But I call you a very wise man because you listened to what the adults told you to do. Because of you willing to listen, you are here today in front of us. And again, as you said earlier, it was good to see how people in your life that you could identify in school. I think you had 2 minority teachers or something along that way. But in spite of that, you progressed. And that because people of all colors took time, it didn't matter the color of your administrators, they cared for you. And so, again, I'd say I'm proud of you, and I hope that you continue to be wise and continue to follow the, I'm sure, your spiritual life. I'm sure you have parents that believe in the right lesson of Christ. And again, I'm proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
In fact, would Miles' parents please stand? We'd like to thank you.
Mr. Chairman, since
Mr.
we're
Buxton.
since you mentioned the Final Four, you kind of seem like a one and done to me. I don't know what Wake Forest is going to do for you. I just go pro. Get out in life. No, I really appreciate the advice you gave us, the seriousness with which you took that task. I've taken a lot of notes here, and I look forward to talking about that. I just so appreciate how you shared your experiences and the folks who've meant something in your life and the humility with which you presented that. Otherwise, I think there are a lot of people probably not humble about your accomplishments, which are quite incredible. But, and I appreciate the teaching fellow parents being here today.
Thank you.
All right. Ms. Godwin.
I just want to say, from a teacher perspective, you are a reflection of why we do what we do every day.
Thank you.
You being able to stand up and say the things you're saying and do the things you're doing and the impact that you're going to make on this world, that is what it's all about. And I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
At the risk of piling on, I'd be remiss if I don't say this. Lisa reminded me of this. I wish every teacher could hear what you had to say, because you are the epitome of what it is we're hoping we do as we sit here month after month and visit those schools that you suggest we do. And your presence, your poise, you are articulate, and you're blessed, as Reggie said. And we all know, and you know as well, that not all are. And so, but the teachers just need to see you. And I hope that, you know, as we go out, I wrote myself a note here to tell this story, because you know, we've all got life stories about who our Final Four were, and that mine were a long time ago. But I just wish every single teacher could hear that. Thank you for your advice as well, and there are pieces of that we really need to to systemically and routinely make sure it's part of our culture. But I also thank you for being strategic and tactical. And by the way, I saw one photo there that said UNC Asheville basketball. And I think my son was the head coach at that time. So he's not there now, but he was the head basketball coach at UNC Asheville at that time. So I'm going to call him and tell him to take credit for what I saw.
Trying to get him to Tennessee.
And if you're going to be one and done, as he said, you know, I can give some advice there. So thank you.
Thank you so much, and we wish you all the best.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much.
Good morning.
Morning.
My name is Greer Webb, and I'm a high school senior at Sanderson High here in Raleigh. Next year, I will be proudly attending the nation's first public university, the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, as a Morehead Cain Scholar. Go Heels. This honor has caused me to think deeply about why what you do in this room is so important. And I want to tell you as a citizen and as a student what I believe to be true. The public education of North Carolina students is a force for good. Our public schools are born out of the idea that North Carolina's children should be served as well as possible by the state. North Carolina's children should be educated by the best teachers. North Carolina's children should be well prepared for the lives of promise set before them. This state has a vested interest in the future of all those that call North Carolina home. Our educational institutions are held in trust by the public under a common understanding that when we build together, what we build will work well. This system of community investment in the future is one that does what other forms of education cannot. I'm not here to disparage private institutions or public charter schools or homeschooling for that matter. Any choice that a family makes for their child is made with the intent to improve that child's future. I am here, however, to give a perspective of a product of North Carolina's public education. This system of public education works every day to prepare students for the world ahead, and the structures in which they do this provide much more to a student and a community than a 7-hour schedule of classes. Our schools will always be more than just classrooms. They are meeting places, community centers, halls of discourse, and heightened knowledge. Our schools are the beating heart of our state because they foster the ideas of our future, and they afford opportunity and responsibility to tomorrow's leaders. Our public schools cannot turn away students based on academic performance, income level, or disability, nor should they want to. They welcome all who wish to learn, and children of diverse backgrounds can access an education provided by the people of our state. Our public schools must accept any student who wishes to learn amongst his or her peers, ensuring that every student, no matter what neighborhood, has access to an education. Every child in every community should receive the same opportunity to be educated as his or her neighbor, because the State Board of Education operates under the principle that all children are deserving of what the public has to offer. I believe, as the North Carolina Constitution states, equal opportunities shall be provided for all students. Students and administrators alike believe that nothing should disqualify a student from deserving an education. Nothing should disqualify a student from deserving the opportunity to state their needs fearlessly in a system designed for them and their futures. The varied backgrounds of students, those of poverty and of wealth, of brown and of white, they give us a strength as well, because knowledge strengthens the student, and knowledge of others can only make students better prepared to help and uplift those around us. Diversity is an advantage of our public schools because our diversity is our strength, no matter how much its value is assailed. It is something that provides understanding and instructs our minds to broaden, the very things that public education hold as a solemn duty. Diversity is a learning experience all on its own. As we grow from our interactions with those who differ from us, we are emboldened to be more caring, more tolerant, and more open. The courage to accept the world around us, as brave and distinct as it is, should always be a tenet of our public institutions. Our public schools facilitate the resolve to open ourselves to the differences of those around us. Students are constantly being taught by those around us, from the classroom to the lunchroom, the field to the theater. Public schools give us this diversity with an intent that belies its value. At its core, public education is accountable to its students for giving a broad and encompassing education. Our public schools are accountable in only ways that public works can be. We all have reason to want our schools to do well. The lens of accountability strengthens public education because accountability gives an imperative. Our schools answer to a body of authority, from parents to board members, and so they must perform to their greatest potential. Schools are the hearts of the communities they serve and the conduits of these communities' hopes. An administrator's leadership, a teacher's knowledge, these are voices that command attention. In our schools, though, there is a perspective that too often is cast aside as inexperienced or disruptive. If public education exists to serve students, it is the student's perspective that requires the most attention and respect. Often, the board becomes enamored by taking charge of the education of students that it does not consider the strength a student perspective would give the decision-making. Only students can tell you what environments best facilitate our learning, the kind of culture that allows us to grow and to reach our potential. Students are those who stand to gain or lose from the changes that take place in meetings like this, so students should have a seat at the table. Because we are those who fall behind when our input is not considered, I ask, could our input be gathered and cherished? Could those you serve be respected and listened to? Can we move forward upholding those who look to the future, hands outstretched in the promise of a better tomorrow? A student's voice is not inexperienced because it is the student who has the first-hand experience of the environment you design. Too often, adults decide the direction the system takes without realizing how the impacts of those decisions are keenly felt by the students. The only way to know if students are being served well is by asking them, and then empowering us to ask our peers if their voices are being heard. Students should be granted the opportunity to ask questions and inform educational decisions. Let me be clear. Polling students on what works and what does not is a first step only. Students must ask the questions that will help us succeed in education, because only students can understand what questions will lead to informed decisions about their experiences. If your mission is to serve, then answering student questions must be a joint venture together with students. For too long, students have felt as though public education forges ahead in the misguided attempt to live in monologue rather than dialogue. The search for this objective implores students to raise our voices, not as one, but as many. The ultimate objective is to improve public education, and students provide this board its existence and purpose. Our education, our suitability to be awed, gives you this ultimate objective of discovering the best way that students can learn. Students should be included in the conversation that dictates our lives, and what we want is simple, a seat at the table. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was assassinated 51 years ago on this day, said that our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Well, students do not want to be silent, but in this adult-driven process, we have little opportunity to speak or be heard. A lack of recognition is not the end of a conversation for those of us who seek to serve the interests of North Carolina's future, and we have the opportunity for dialogue. Not only do we deserve the opportunity to engage in dialogue, it is essential that we act as partners in this vital mission. North Carolina statute allows for the appointment of 2 high school students to the State Board of Education, and we have the chance to refill these positions, which have remained vacant since 2016. We urge our leaders, search for young men and young women, search hard and search well. Our voices deserve to be heard, and this body must turn an attentive ear to these voices in order to succeed in the noble cause of education. We must work together to achieve an education that is both compelling and engaging, one that yields graduates prepared to work, to lead, to ignite the future. Our voices, the voices of youth, are the single most important sound in the cacophony that is the debate over public education. Only by listening to students can you accomplish what we need to succeed and to serve others. We are all of us the shareholders in this proud and storied commitment to education for all. And to see this vision realized for future generations and for the generation of today that is cast aside, student voices must ring out clear in the strident sea of agitation. We wait on your decisions with bated breath, constantly wondering if what is decided in this room will hurt or help us. The truth is, this process should not be one of uncertainty for students. If we are in the room where the decisions are made, we can clearly and intentionally help you to structure our education in the most effective and successful way possible. We are your clients, your dependents, your beneficiaries, and your children. Those you sustain and those you protect. We are your students. I speak to you as one of these, your client, your dependent. I am one you sustain and protect. I am a student, and in your care I have grown to be who I am today. I have listened and looked and learned for 13 years as a student of this state's public schools. I have seen great leaders and average learners pass through the halls of these schools, and I am testifying to you today that each one of us, every single one of us who goes through this system has the capacity to be either. If we have the chance to be heard, though, the odds are tilted in our favor. If we have the chance to advise our leaders on the system that influences our lives, we all have the chance to be those great leaders, to be great listeners, to be honest and capable students, and to realize our potential in a system built to educate the most promising generation this world has ever seen. We have this chance within our grasp, and it is up to you to further help us seize it. Thank you.
Mr. Webb, and I trust your parents are also here.
They
would
are.
love
They
to
are indeed.
say thank you to them.
Yes, thank you.
Please stand. Thank you. Comments from my colleagues? Mr. Ford.
If I may. So obviously, I think you could tell by the reaction that was pretty good. You know what I mean? that was all right. To both of the young men, to Mr. Cyrus as well, I think there's a common theme that can be gleaned from both speeches, and you know, it's an often said proverb, particularly in social movements, that nothing about us without us is for us, right? And so what I hear is a constant refrain of students letting us know that despite our best intentions, if we're not being deliberate about incorporating student voices in an authentic way, and not just to either offer a stamp of approval or denial, but really sharing power in the decision-making process, that we're essentially setting ourselves up for trouble. Because you are our clients, you are the beneficiaries, or in the case of a bad decision, those who suffer. And so that's something I want to bring to our attention. The other thing is this notion of, you know, again, going back to the qualitative data piece, talking to students about their experiences, because no one knows better what the school is like than the students and what they need to be successful. And so I just want to raise that as a possibility as we move forward. This notion of student surveys or, you know, focus groups or interviews with students, us entertaining the possibility of building that into our accountability framework going forward. So thank you so much, both of you, for raising those issues.
Thank you. And if I could respond quickly to Miles's point, I think that's an excellent idea. But even pushing that forward, being able to incorporate students in crafting the questions for those surveys, right? Because too often, you know, I'm a senior, too often I'll see other seniors or underclassmen saying, I don't like how this question is phrased, or I'm a little nervous or scared to speak up because it feels like it's authority judging me based on the question. And maybe where that student perspective could come into play there is helping create the questions, helping to draft the questions, you know, having students ask the teachers, you know, can we help you when these surveys go out, when these school-wide emails go out? Can students be the one to write or to type these things? Because we know what will get the response from our classmates. So thank you for that comment, Mr. Ford.
Thank you. Ms. Willoughby.
I'm so impressed. I kind of wish this had happened at the end of our meeting, because I would love to walk out of this room feeling exactly how I feel now. I mean, yes. Every time we hear from students, I become optimistic about the future, because you're better than we are. You know, you're going to ignite that future. I love that phrase that you used. And I just want to say that for the first 16 years I was on this board, I'm now in past 18.
Past 18.
But what I've really missed the last 2 years has been the student voices that we always had at the end of the table down here. We had 2 student advisors, and they offered incredible input. I worked very closely with the last senior advisor, Yates Dobson, who gave us incredible feedback. And that, I can't remember, JB, whose idea that was. Was that Governor Hunt, or who added the student advisors? But it was an incredibly important voice that sat at this table, just like the voices of our teachers and principals and school board members and superintendents. And I really look forward to a time that we'll have those 2 people back at this table to give us that input every month.
Mr. McDivitt.
Just again, the same thing I said about Miles. Your poise, the articulation. We understand. We really understand what you mean, and I appreciate the admonishment. We've been on here a long time, she said. I feel like my Social Security is in good hands, so with you 2 leading, somehow that's still going to be out there, I think, way on down the road. So, but I do appreciate the admonishment. The history of having that student voice at this table is critical. It predates having the voice of administrators at this table. And it's real important. We've had students over the years. We had one young man who would catch a bus out of Charlotte to come to this board meeting. He had to catch a ride to the bus station, but he was our student advisor. I learned a lot back. That same son, Miles, that became a coach and is now still coaching. He was the student advisor to this board. He lived west of Asheville, and he was a student advisor here, and I recall him advising this board on ABCs. And my boss, Governor Hunt at the time, was part of the architect of that. Mike, you recall that? And my son's comments to this board did not align with my boss's, but it was okay, because it was part of that comments that you were making about how we should get to a good place. Right. And I really liked what James said about if you're not part of it, then it might not be helping you. The other thing I would just say to the board members that has been helpful for me, the geographic area out there in the West with those 20 counties. As you know, I meet with the superintendents monthly. Another thing I do often is visit, and so I ask for focus groups. And I do these focus groups with teachers. I've never done those with students unless I left there informed and inspired. Never left. And so I would just say to another opportunity for us is not only to have that voice in a systemic way at this table, but also a less formal way where you're out there and you're going to visit a school and there's going to be a groundbreaking. Ask them to pull a few students together and do a focus group about things, and then you really will hear things that perhaps and ideas perhaps, but you'll always leave inspired. Thank you for who you are. Thank you for, and I look forward to, and I say go Hills too.
Go Hills. Thank you.
Greer and Miles, will you come forward and allow us to thank you, please? Members of the board, join us.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Yes, ma'am.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Put Reggie on the end. Or other ones anyway.
Or other, some tables.
Sooner the better.
Get discouraged.
Feels so good right
Refreshing, refreshing.
Thank you. So strong.
Hey, Mr. Chairman, can I just say this, since I've known
Mr. Buxton?
since I've known Greer since he was knee-high to a grasshopper.
And he's overcome that.
He's overcome that. I just got to say this. Whether it was Quail Hollow Swim Club, Parks and Rec basketball, you never did develop a jump shot. Or watching him go to Sanderson High. There was no one in our neighborhood who didn't think that he would be sitting here doing that well. This kid has been an unbelievable member of our community. And for those of you who don't read the News and Observer and know the Raleigh News, he doesn't just talk the talk. He formed the equity team at Sanderson High School that raised student voice about equity. He formed a citywide movement around gun violence in high schools that brought all kinds of students into student voice. So this wasn't just a speech. He's lived it.
Yeah.
And I want to meet the Sanderson English teachers. I thought this guy had a right.
In all honesty, this could also point out the power of the student voice. I have my friend Woody Wise back there who helped me craft the speech, so I'd be remiss if we didn't honor him with the Woody. And on the side over there.
Thank you. Well, you're right, Ms. Willoughby. This is tempting to just adjourn right now.
Best thing we've done.
But we must persevere. So thank you. Thank you both. So our next item on the agenda concerns Fast NC, and on March 5 and 15, 2019, an executive committee of this board met to discuss and decide on the 7th and 8th disbursements from the board's established NC Education Fund for Fast NC applicants. And we're all too familiar with the devastation that Hurricane Florence caused. Students, educators, school staff members, and like so many other members of the community, suffered as a result of the storm. And helping these children and educators to recover from the storm and continue the process of teaching and learning have been critical steps in restoring the well-being of their families and communities. The purpose of Fast NC is to provide funds and in-kind contributions to assist public school students and employees in recovering from the impact of Hurricane Florence. Priority is being given to school materials, supplies, and resources that aid students in being prepared for instruction and aid teachers in the restoration of high-quality learning environment. The Fast NC Steering Committee includes the superintendent and myself, along with former State Superintendent June Atkinson, Phil Kirk, former State Board Chair, Henry Johnson, former Assistant U.S. Secretary of Education, and former State Superintendent Dr. Mike Ward, who chairs the Fast NC Steering Committee. And at this time, I'll turn the program over to Dr. Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, board members.
Good morning.
Thank you for this opportunity to serve. It's a pleasure to be associated with the work of Fast NC. This month, we recognize awardees from rounds 7 and 8. There are 6 districts that we're recognizing for the applications, their successful applications in rounds 7 and 8. We'll start with the Brunswick County schools. North Brunswick High School was hit hard by the storm, yet the school served as a shelter for folks in the community. The school applied for and is being awarded $16,350 to replace a band storage shed, horticultural supplies, lab materials, gym tarps, and a scoreboard timer. Superintendent Jerry Oates is here today, along with the North Brunswick assistant principals who submitted the application, Amy Callahan Hayes and Kim Brown. We'll ask them to stand now, and then we'll all convene for photos at a point a little later in the agenda. Would you all stand? Columbus County Schools is the second district we recognize today. 5 grants were awarded in response to grants submitted by teachers and principals from the Columbus County Schools. These grants total over $5,000, and a variety of equipment, materials, and instructional supplies were covered by these grants. Columbus was hard hit, and the district's teachers and school leaders have stepped up to help students and colleagues through a strong grant writing effort. Jonathan Williams, Superintendent, is here representing the Columbus County Schools. Superintendent Williams. Become a regular trek for him. Craven County Schools. Craven County was also particularly hard hit. Jennifer Jordan at J.T. Barber Elementary School filed the first application from Craven County. Fast NC has awarded Ms. Jordan $2,000 to replace playground equipment and gross motor skills equipment to be used with pre-K students who have developmental disabilities. Jennifer Jordan and the district's elementary education director, Jason Griffin, are here with us today. Would you stand? Significant damage was done in the New Hanover County Schools as well. 2 Fast NC grants were awarded to media centers in the district in round 8. These grants totaled over $3,700, and they will go to Emma B. Trask Middle School and Walter L. Parsley Elementary School to replace library books and materials. Valita Quattlebaum, Chief Communications Officer for the district, is here today. The Onslow County Schools. Few districts experienced the level of devastation that was visited upon the Onslow County Schools. In round 7, Jacksonville High School received $2,900 for the media center, which has become the place to study, to work, to recharge devices and equipment for folks who don't have that kind of space at home anymore. The Onslow Early College High School depleted their school account to feed kids in the aftermath of the storm. They depleted their school fund, and we've awarded over $1,000 to the Onslow County Early College High School in order to replenish that fund so that they can use it to purchase books, supplies, and other materials. Brent Anderson, Executive Director of Community Affairs for the Onslow County Schools, is here today for that district. The Whiteville City Schools. The Whiteville City Schools submitted their second application in round 7. April Corbett at Central Middle School applied for and is receiving $1,000 for replacement of PE and exercise equipment. Superintendent Kenny Garland could not be here today, but extends his deep appreciation to the board and to those who were associated with Fast NC. These are your honorees, your grant recipients for rounds 7 and 8, Mr. Chair, and members of the board. And Mr. Superintendent, I believe the floor is yours.
Thank you. We continue to have great support for Fast NC. Grant applications have been coming in, and as of today, the state board through Fast NC has approved nearly 60, totaling $365,000. Communities and Schools of North Carolina is our partner in providing Fast NC resources to districts as well. To date, they have awarded an additional 6 grants, totaling over $140,000. School supplies and tens of thousands of books have been donated and are available at the textbook warehouse. Multiple school districts in storm-impacted region have the state have received these valuable materials. The good news and the bad news, the books are almost gone and in the hands of students whose schools were hit hardest by this storm. So as you can see, Fast NC is ready to help. Round 10 applications will be received through tomorrow, April 5th. Round 11 applications will be received from April 6th to 19th. Round 12 applications will be received from April 20th to May 3rd. Round 13 applications will be received from May 4th to 17th. To apply, go to Fast NC website and click Apply Now. We also are at the 6-month anniversary for the formation of Fast NC. We're about 6.5 to 7 months from when Hurricane Florence hit, and the needs are still very real. We have a special clip to show you. Immediately after the storm hit and we launched Fast NC, we reached out to many partners, as you know, and one of those partners was actually the NC Education Lottery. And the NC Education Lottery has actually been helping us get the word out about Fast NC. They've shared this as at their multimedia monitors at their retail locations. They put the banner on the homepage of their website, helping drive people to Fast NC's website to donate. They've also helped with internal communications and setting up drives for their own employees. And what I'm very excited about is we're going to preview for you the public service announcements that the NC Education Lottery has done for us. I do believe these will be placed on North Carolina TV, and then we're also going to be putting out a version on social media as well. So when we're ready, we can play that.
Eastern North Carolina received a tremendous hit when Hurricane Florence came. A lot of the schools were heavily damaged with the amount of rain and wind that occurred.
It was so loud and scary. You could just hear the shingles ripping off.
I rode out by the school and it was heartbreaking just to see the way the pavement had been pushed up, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is unreal. I mean, how are we going to ever come back from this?
The hurricane has been gone now for a couple of months, but for Eastern North Carolina, the nightmare is not over. We're still dealing with the loss of our homes. Schools have been lost.
I just don't want people to forget about us because it's not over for us. We're still living it.
We can't do it by ourselves. We're going to need some help.
Anybody that can reach out and help Eastern North Carolina will be greatly appreciated. And we're still counting on the generosity of people to continue to go forward.
Is there another one, or is it just that one? No, that's good. Okay, good. Thank you very much to the NC Education Lottery. You'll be seeing that throughout the state of North Carolina to remind people that we still have a long way to go to recovery. So very much appreciate that, and very much appreciate Dr. Ward for his leadership and helping bring us all together. Again, we've raised over $1 million, and we're getting that money out. It's fantastic news. Thank you.
And if, Dr. Ward, if you and the district representatives could come forward, we'd like to make a presentation to you. And the board, please.
Start with new head over
Mine was just right through that.
Yes.
I guess.
Craven.
Like old times. I'm getting in trouble. Like old times.
One more. 3, 2, 1.
Yeah, you need to slide down.
Let's put Craven. Let's put Craven in there.
Yeah.
And we'll throw more your letter down. What you doing, bro? You're seeing it.
It's like old times.
Griffin from Craven County.
We know him well.
It's like Craven County day today, bro.
Oh, yeah.
Brunswick. Spoken before.
This is a different kind of product right here. Thank you, thank you.
Oh, thank you.
That's low count.
Hey.
We got good spirit. Be careful.
They do call you Uncle Ray. She said it when she came up. Old County,
It's Wayne.
That's lovingly. That's right. Yes. It's changed.
Dr. Ward, thank you again for your leadership, and we look forward to seeing you next month. All right. Next on our agenda is an update on legislative activities, and I'll turn to, excuse me. Before we get to a legislative update, we have an opportunity to express our support for an important initiative that has been occurring across our state for the last few months that's critical to the future of North Carolina. Appropriately named My Futures North Carolina, I'm proud to recognize Mr. Dale Jenkins, Chief Executive Officer for Medical Mutual Holdings, a member of the My Future NC Commission. Mr. Jenkins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a pleasure to be here today. I'm sorry I haven't been before, but after hearing those two presentations by those two students, I think I might come back. Those were mighty impressive. The only thing I'm distressed about is that my good friend Rod Webb and fellow Demon Deacon has let his son go to UNC. but I guess the lure and the pull of a Moorhead King scholarship is pretty powerful, so I may forgive him for that. In any event, I am glad to be here today. I've lived in North Carolina for 62 years. This is a wonderful state, a great place to call home. But like many of you who've lived here over the last several years, we've seen North Carolina change. We've seen our economy change. We've seen our skills needs change. We've seen our workforce needs change. I grew up in Rutherford County. And in Rutherford County back in the 60s and 70s, you know what dominated the landscape from an employment perspective? Textile mills. There probably were 40, 50 textile mills that dotted the landscape within a 50-mile radius of where I grew up. And today, when I travel back to visit my folks and see my brother and my family, maybe there are less than 5. And so that's a marked shift in terms of what skills are necessary for our citizens to compete in the workforce of the future. In 2016, I was privileged to chair the North Carolina Chamber. In that role, I traveled across North Carolina. I met with fellow CEOs, fellow business owners who are desperate for employees. They're desperate to find people who have the right skills that they need to successfully run their businesses. So when Margaret Spellings called me about almost 2 years ago now, and she said that she was putting together a group to focus on establishing an education attainment goal for North Carolina, it didn't take me but about 5 seconds and I was all in. Because I believe strongly that education is the great hope, the great opportunity, door opener that everybody needs in this state. So what we've done over the last 18 months, we've gathered together at My Future NC a group of business leaders, a group of educators, a group of community volunteers, a group of philanthropists, And we've been on a journey. We've been on a journey going all across North Carolina, talking with different groups about what education needs to look like as we move into the future. It's been a fascinating time. We've talked, as I said, with lots of people. We've got lots of input. And I'm proud to say we've had lots of buy-in from the education leaders in North Carolina. Superintendent Johnson has been a major part of our initiative. The Margaret Spellings and now Bill Roper from the University of North Carolina system have been involved. Hope Williams from the independent colleges in North Carolina has been involved. And Peter Hans now has been involved in a big way. So we've got the right leadership in place. We've got the right organizational group in place. And so we went about our challenge over the last year and trying to figure out what is exactly the right attainment goal for North Carolina. I didn't realize this, but we were one of only 9 states in the country that didn't have an education attainment goal. So after much work, much thought, much debate, lots of good input from thought leaders in education, we have established an attainment goal that we announced this month, last month, February 20th at NC State. And we had that day, we had a nice function. Superintendent Johnson was there along with other education leaders. We had the governor there. We had Senator Berger, Speaker Moore. It was a good bipartisan effort to affirm the education attainment goal that I'm going to share with you today. And that goal is simply this. We want, by the year 2030, we want 2 million North Carolinians between the ages of 25 and 44 to have a post-secondary degree or a high-quality certification. Let me say that again. 2 million North Carolinians between the ages of 25 and 44 to have a post-secondary degree or a high-quality certification. If you look at the jobs that have been created since the Great Recession, 99% of those jobs require some degree beyond high school. We're going to fall further and further behind unless we really ramp our efforts up and achieve the attainment goal that I've set forth for you today. If we keep on the current trajectory, we estimate the number of North Carolinians with those a degree or certification would only be about 1.4 million to 1.5 million. So that leaves between 400,000 and a 500,000 individual gap in terms of what the future workforce in North Carolina is going to require us to provide. So we're here today to talk about that goal. We are now in the process of establishing sort of an infrastructure, if you would, to stand this objective up so that we can work now toward making it a reality. I tell my friends all the time that ideas are worth $1. Execution is worth a lot. And so making this come alive, making this happen is what we're all about as we move forward. We've been kindly funded by 4 individual groups. Funding was provided to us by the John M. Belk Endowment in Charlotte, by the Goodnight Foundation here in the Triangle, by the Lumina Foundation, as well as the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. They've been important contributors and they've been important encouragers as we've gone on our journey. So today we're here to ask you to endorse this goal. We think it's an ambitious goal, we think it's an attainable goal, but we think it's a goal that we're all going to have to work for. And it's going to take a concerted effort between K-12, community colleges, our university system, all of us working together to make this happen. It's also going to take a lot of input from folks like me in the business community. We can't just talk about this, we can't just send a check in to support this. We need to get engaged. So I will give you an example of what we're doing. Just this week, I have 20 of my colleagues at Medical Mutual. Now we're Cure. We changed our name over the weekend. But 20 of my colleagues have volunteered to become mentors at Millbrook High School, which is a mile down the road from us. So we have got to be engaged in the business community to make this happen. It can't fall on the shoulders of all of you in the education world. It has to be a partnership with us. So again, thank you for the opportunity to be here today. Thank you for your public service and what you do for our state. And I'm pleased to answer any questions you may have about the attainment goal that we've established at My Future NC.
Questions from my colleagues? I think that clearly shows that we enthusiastically endorse this goal, and we're proud to partner with you and others in achieving and exceeding this goal. And just to express that more clearly, I'd like to call on Mr. McDivitt to read a resolution in support of
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Jenkins, you would have been proud of a conversation we had at this table yesterday as we discussed a number of things that where we pretty much said all of the above when we were talking about CTE and the importance of that balance, and we talked about the jobs and that are in the future and how we chase those and make sure that we're preparing our kids for that. And so thank you for that. And it is ironic that we do this today, and the chair asked if I would, before we call you up to receive this, I'll read this into the minutes and then call you forward. North Carolina State Board of Education, a resolution establishing a partnership with My Future NC for the North Carolina State Board of Education. Whereas the State Board of Education has an approved strategic plan that includes a goal that every student in a North Carolina public school system graduates from high school prepared for work, further education, and citizenship. And whereas equitable opportunities for public school students, educators, and administrators are strengthened through partnerships that focus on comprehensive priorities with alignment to the State Board of Education strategic plan and guiding principles. And whereas the board acknowledges that other state and local agencies, along with educators, parents, communities, and philanthropists, each have significant roles in meeting the needs of children and in removing barriers to their success. And whereas the broad focus areas of My Future NC to reach its 2030 objectives, education and workforce alignment, access to lifelong educational opportunities, preparation for education, career, and life, support the North Carolina State Board of Education's vision that, quote, every public school student graduates ready for post-secondary education and work, prepared to be globally engaged in a productive citizen through access to needed resources and rigor. And whereas the North Carolina Constitution declares that the people have a right to the privilege of education, and that it is the duty of the state to guard and maintain that right. And whereas the North Carolina Constitution establishes the North Carolina State Board of Education as a body whose duty is to make all needed rules and regulations as it supervises and administers the free public school system, subject to laws enacted by the General Assembly. And whereas the board admires and supports the work of My Future NC Commission, whose efforts make use of educational and financial resources to fully benefit North Carolina's public school students, educators, and administrators. And whereas the State Board of Education acknowledges that its partnership with My Future NC will help ensure that North Carolina recruits and retains the best educators to improve academic outcomes for all students regardless of background. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the North Carolina State Board of Education encourages continued and sustained momentum of the My Future NC Commission to move its work forward to obtain its ambitious and rigorous goals by 2030, and resolved that board members direct the Secretary of the State Board of Education to enter a copy of this resolution into the official minutes of the North Carolina State Board of Education. Signed by Eric Davis, Chairman of the North Carolina State Board of Education, and Mark Johnson, Superintendent, on April 4th, 2019.
Thank you. Terrific.
Also move. Move adoption.
Very good. Mr. Jenkins, can you come forward? We'd love to present.
Sure, thank you.
Want to adopt the resolution, or do we do that later?
Okay, yeah, sure. So Mr. McDevitt has made a motion to adopt this resolution. Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Dr. Townsend Smith, will you call the roll?
Yes.
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 Yes. Motion carries. Dale, thanks so much for coming. Really appreciate it. So, y'all, board members? Lead them up here, Jill.
Jill just loves these photos. Thank you.
Thank you for your leadership.
Thanks for giving some time. Thank you so much. Have a great day. Thanks so much.
Resolution.
We just enjoy it. We just.
Shred's all that, right? Okay. That's what you guys.
We'll now move to our legislative update, and I'll call on Ms. Cecilia Holden to provide this update.
Thank you. Is the empty room an indication of the interest?
Not at all. You have our full attention.
Thank you. I will begin by saying it is a very, very busy season. We, in addition to all the bills that are being filed, we get a number of requests from the General Assembly members and staff, and without the help of the agency, it would not be possible to do what we do every day. We track these requests that come in, and they're coming in so quickly. I asked Ann this morning to give us an idea as to how many. It's several hundred that the agency is having to handle. So thanks to the DPI team for helping to make this possible, to get these answers back over, which in turn helps to craft legislation, and hopefully good legislation. In terms of where we are with the session, we have currently 265 K-12 education-related bills that have been filed to date. Put it in perspective, in 2017, in the full long session that year, we had 292. We still have about 3 weeks left for filing. I think we'll start seeing some things slow down. The Senate's last date was this week, but things continue to move forward with lots of bills being filed. Of those bills, Mr. McDevitt, we have about 50 plus that have an impact on some sort of reporting. So we'll see what that plays out, depending on what bills actually make it all the way through the process. We have 59 that have been related to calendar flexibility, which has been a huge topic this session and continues to have a lot of traction. We'll see what ends up coming out in the end. We have 9 that have been related to school safety, which has also been a big topic. I'll speak to some of these in more detail. And at this point in time, we've got 19 that have actually made it through what we call the crossover process. So they've moved from one chamber to the other, which means that they can continue moving forward. 17 of those have been on the House side, and 2 have actually been on the Senate side. The House has got a lot more that have been moving through the system. But I anticipate we'll start to see more traction on the Senate side with the filing this week. In regards to the crossover deadline, that is May the 9th. So we have about a month left for these bills to keep moving. In terms of the dates that are still left for bill filing, we've got public bills that can be filed by the House that are non-budget items, so anything that doesn't have a budget related to it, that is due April the 16th, and then anything that has a budget item related to it, the House has a filing date of April the 23rd. On the items that have made crossover, I'm going to try to focus on those specifically. We've actually had what I would consider to be several that align nicely with the legislative agenda that the State Board put forward this year. So I'm going to speak to those, and then I'll also highlight some that may not align as well. The first one is in regards to calendar flexibility. So like I said, there's been a lot of them that have been out there. There's one that has made crossover, House Bill 79, and that's where the calendar would align with the community college system. Another bill that's made crossover has several things in it that are related. It started out as an agency bill, and it's a lot of report date changes and things that specifically speak to our reports. A PCS was introduced, and that's a committee substitute. And it ended up taking out some of our report request changes, but it added in 2 components that we like and that we had asked for on our legislative agenda. One of those is related to the Professional Educator Preparation Standards Commission, and it does offer the staggered terms for that. The other is in regards to our Education Workforce Innovation Commission, and it allows for designees. So those were introduced into that bill, which made crossover. 2 bills have been introduced that relate to school capital One was on the House side, one was on the Senate side. I think I spoke to both of those last month, and they each have made crossover. So there again, I think that's good news. At least there's a focus this session around adding school capital construction funding. Another bill that has been introduced that was on our legislative agenda is in regards to the 15-point grading scale and being able to make sure that that stays in place. That bill may cross over. In addition to that, one of the items that we had spoken that we would like to see is an opportunity for some sort of review and for us to be able to provide an opportunity, input to the General Assembly as to what the weightings and the indicators might look like on the school report card. There's a couple of bills that have made crossover, two different versions, and I think that the House is trying to see what might actually make any traction in the Senate side. One speaks to having two separate report cards. One that would be focused on your growth and the other on your achievement. And then the other option that is in a separate bill is where you've got a 50-50 split between growth and achievement. So both of those have made crossover. Our request of the General Assembly was that we would be able to weigh in, study it, and bring back what our recommendation would be.
Mr. McDivitt.
So to understand that correctly, the 15-point grading scale bill has made crossover.
It has.
And the bills associated with growth and achievement have made those, but those are three separate bills.
Totally separate bills.
And my question on the 15-point scale, is that to make it permanent, or is that another extension of relief for another year or two?
Mr. McDevitt, I will get back to you. I think it's permanent, but I don't want to speak.
Thank you.
I'll give you an answer back. Two other bills that have come out of the House that we have provided input on. One is House Bill 315, and that's on the instructional material selection. And this bill would move the textbook adoption process down to the local level. And at this point, in regards to the local ability to manage that process, I think that that would create some challenges. There are two things in that bill that we do want to see, and that would speak to the ability to have textbook rental, which was on our legislative agenda, and that would be with the community college system. And then the other piece that was in there would be the opportunity to purchase devices, so that where you have online content, you would be able to purchase the devices for those that don't have the one-to-one.
Would those be on a state contract, and would there be economy of scale?
This would move this down to the local level.
So,
the selection and the purchasing process.
So they could be on state contract, or is there an economy of scale? Are we going to have, does that bill have 115 systems that may or may not be able to take advantage of volume? That's my question, I guess.
It is my understanding this would move it all down to the local level.
Okay, so there's no. No, okay.
Another bill is in regards to, it's House Bill 377, and this reduces testing for the state. The primary components of that bill would be to eliminate the North Carolina final exam. It would replace the EOGs with a similar process to our current NC check-ins. It would replace the EOCs with the ACT or another nationally recognized assessment. And it would eliminate the requirement for the work keys, the ACT work keys. It would prohibit standardized testing at the local level, and it would also prohibit graduation projects as a condition of graduation. In regards to newly filed legislation, so those were the items that I just spoke to that have actually made crossover. In regards to the newly filed legislation, there are quite a number of bills that the agency or the state board was involved in. One of those is Senate Bill 438, the Excellent Public Schools Act of 2019. JB might want to speak a little bit in detail to that, but this provided some flexibility in our Read to Achieve program and some things that the state board was in favor of. JB, do you want to elaborate in any detail on that one?
I'm happy to, if there are questions, except just to say it was good to be in partnership with the department and the board. and the Senate, and I think you'd find in our framework for action that we passed, probably about 70% of what we were looking to do moved into pieces of that bill. There's some things not in there, and some additional flexibility that we did tell the Senate we continue to try to ask for if districts wanted to come to us and propose a way to have flexibility with their teacher assisted, and textbook allotments to put a specific plan in place to address their reading deficiencies. That would be something the department could review and we could approve. That did not make it into the bill. I think we'll continue to work on that, but a lot of what we talked about at this table is in that bill, and certainly it's been a good partnership with that.
Thank you. Yes, we had there was a press announcement on this, and Mr. Buxton, the superintendent, participated along with Senator Berger in his office, so that was real good.
And Brock. Please mention Brock. That's, yeah.
I'm sorry, thank you. Absolutely. And Brock Wumble.
Yes.
Absolutely, my oversight. Another one is
Could I ask a question about the bridge of these two issues? You mentioned allowing devices to be purchased through the textbook adoption and on the Read to Achieve. Do we still have a plan to reduce the number of devices we still have in warehouse? I think we're still at about 2,400. Are we? That's a question. I guess that's for the department.
Yes, the plan is still what we shared last month. As we work towards next year and implement more and more personalized learning, we will get those out this spring and over the summer to make sure they are dedicated to schools and districts that actually have more of a need for those devices, because their ratio is not as good as other districts that, while we might have other districts that use their own money, we talk a lot about equity is not the same as being equal. So we're going to help from the state get those to the schools that need them the most.
Does that mean those will be distributed prior to the beginning of the next school year?
Yes.
So when you say spring, we're talking about now, essentially?
Yes.
Another bill is Senate Bill 669, and this is the innovative school district modifications. And I will note that the bill that was actually filed simply brings it back to the state board to study, and it doesn't spell out all of our requests that we have in there. The senator who is the bill sponsor does intend to go through what was pages of recommendations, and then we'll submit into the bill the things that she's in agreement with. So it was a great partnership. I think that we're going to see a lot of good things coming out of that bill that are thanks to Amy White and JB, along with Letisa and Maria, and input from the field. So that I think will end up being a very good bill. Another bill that was filed that is Senate Bill 672 that plays into our legislative agenda. In that bill is funding and FTEs that speak specifically to military liaison and counselors, which was on our legislative agenda and on our budget request. And then Senate Bill 601 was filed this week, and there has been a 2-year history of the mental health policy with the state board, and an attempt to try to be able to put some things in place that would help the student population in the schools around this topic. The superintendent had convened a work group, and this has been a phenomenal partnership to be able to get to where we are. I think the bill that was filed is very favorable. We've had a lot of good input from all the different stakeholders that were on the front end of this. So that bill was filed this week, and hopefully we'll see some traction. We've got some really good bill sponsors behind it. Another bill, Senate Bill 612, speaks to high school credit and dual enrollment and workforce training. The state board is in the process and will be moving forward over the coming meetings, reviewing some policies that will be put forward that hopefully will align well with this bill. We've reached out to the community colleges, and I think that can be some good collaboration to try to make sure that the final product in this bill aligns nicely with the policies that are being set forward. And then we have Senate Bill 580, which is the classroom supplies for the teachers. I will spell out that the state board has $18 million in our instructional materials and classroom supplies budget request for the General Assembly. So hopefully we will see funding that would play into being able to implement that in a way that would be positive for the schools as well as the teachers. Senate Bill 170 was filed, and that's the expand principal bonus multiplier eligibility. That was filed, I believe, when we met last time. That's the bill that would allow the principals to receive the double bonus based on the interpretation that there was some legislation that was needed to be tweaked. So that bill's still out there. We're not seeing the movement, but hopefully that will continue moving forward. We certainly need that fix in place.
Ms. Kamitz, did you have a comment?
I just wanted to go back briefly to Senate Bill 580. And I feel the need to join my two Teacher of the Year colleagues in expressing concern about the effect of that bill. I don't think any of us argue about the need for teachers to have more support resources for supplies in our state budget. Our budget, it's in our budget, as Cecilia just mentioned, but I think doing it by taking the money away from those LEAs is in grave danger of backfiring and not accomplishing what it sets out to accomplish, because I think that there's an awful lot of uses that the LEAs make of those resources that affect teachers directly in the classroom. And it may end up that teachers end up having to spend the money on copiers and printers and all sorts of things, software packages that are now covered on a LEA basis. So I have concerns, and I want to support our two teachers in the position that they've taken on that.
Thank you. Ms. Willoughby.
And I second that. I appreciate Ms. Kamitz's comments. And, you know, I think when we ask for the supply money from the state board, when we've talked about that, what we'd like to see is a recovery of I think there's been about a 50% reduction since about 2008 in instructional supply funding per student. And, you know, I agree with you. I think, you know, there have been comments that the money was misspent, but that hasn't come to us. If the money was misspent in Guilford and Mecklenburg and Duplin, we'd probably know that from some of our local board members. And so I think that's a very serious issue that we need to look at, because, you know, we used to ask our business members at NCBCE to support Donors Choose because teachers were using money out of their pockets. They always have. And if there's been I think it's actually a 55% reduction in the per student money for instructional supplies in the last 10 years, you know, that's getting worse for teachers, and this is not the fix.
Mr. Ford.
I just want to briefly go on record and offering my support as well for both positions and for our Teacher of the Year advisors and their commentary. I think that, obviously I think folks are motivated by the notion of helping to support teachers and so forth, but I think the law of unintended consequences is at play here. So,
Mr. Duncan.
Can I ask a clarifying question on that? I want to make sure I heard the numbers right. On that bill, was it $18 million?
No.
I didn't think that would be right.
No, our request was for an additional $18 million.
Okay.
Towards instructional supplies.
Okay.
New money.
Textbooks.
New money, okay.
We wanted.
Yeah. Thank you. That's helpful in terms of trying to work through the math.
For instructional materials and supplies.
Under this new bill, what would the total number be? That is, whether awarded directly to teachers or to districts or to some combination of both, what would?
It would take $400 and allow the teachers to be able to purchase supplies with that. Existing funds is my understanding, but Senator Ballard made a comment in the press announcement that as part of the Appropriations Committee that she would be looking at it from the full perspective. So my hope is that we would see some additional funds coming into this, but it's not clear through the legislation.
That's really what I was trying to get at. Does this bill specify what the total number would be?
It would be 400, and I would assume that would be rolled out with the number of teachers that we have.
I know I'm not being clear. I mean the total number for the state, the number of dollars the state would allocate for this. I understand it's $400 per teacher, and I
think it was 37 million.
37 out of 47.
47 million to 37 million.
Yeah, that's what
Districts should go from 47 to 10.
Right, that's what and so that would then create the hybrid of how that would be divided by simply doing the mathematical proposition.
Would this also support locally funded teachers, and would they get the $400? And I'll go back to my earlier question about economy of scale on purchasing. Would the teachers do that individually and, just go down to the local school supply or supply store and get it outside of the process, which I'm assuming in most cases would be an increase in the cost of, if we're talking about school supplies, particularly if we're talking about copiers and copier.
It's my understanding that there would be an app, and that the app would work with select vendors to be able to purchase those supplies. And I don't know if there were negotiated agreements or ability as it pertains to the vendors that would be leveraged for that purpose.
I'm not, this was related, but I don't want to leave that subject until people are, but it's directly related to it. If it's all right, then all of these bills are, I hope, would be dependent on, or a lot of them would be dependent on the budget bill. I think you gave us a deadline that they hope to meet crossover with the budget. House is doing the budget first this year?
The House is doing the budget, and they come out first with their version, and then the Senate comes out with theirs. But the budget itself, I apologize for not having the date, but the House has set a date where they, or at least they plan to come out with something in April, and then the Senate come out with their budget in May.
And, again, whether it's fiscal notes regarding these bills or whether it's the budget bill itself, so critical, whether it's school supplies and adding into get us back to the 100% we were 10 years ago. And not just with school supplies, but with other things as well. My question, and you may be going to get to this, but it has to do with support personnel. We discussed that tangentially yesterday, and the question was, what does it look like relative to that? I don't think we know what it looks like this time. We talked a little bit about the use of the earlier monies regarding that. What are we asking for, and what are we going to get?
On the school support personnel?
Yeah.
You teed me up for my last two.
Oh, super. Is it going to be part of the budget bill or a separate bill?
Well, there are two bills that have been filed, but it would need to be also included in the budget bill. But there's two bills that have been filed that speak specifically to the school support positions. One is House Bill 524, and that provides additional funding that would be specifically stated to go to nurses, school nurses. In the first year, it would be $10 million, then $20 million, and then $30.7 million. And our projections to fully fund the nurses to get us to the national recommended ratios, or ratio was $47 million, so this would put us on a path forward to do that. Our current is one nurse per 1,055. This would put us on a path to get to that 1 per 750 students. So that's one bill. Another bill that was filed is Senate Bill 424, and this bill would fully fund school counselors and psychologists. And it's a phased-in 2-year approach to get us to the national recommended ratios. And for the 2 years, it would phase in. First year would be $87 million, the second year would be $175 million, and the third year would be $262 million. And the estimated need that we had was $105 million for school psychologists to get to that national recommended ratio, and $135 million to get to it for the counselors. So those two bills speak to 3 of the positions that we discussed. And then there's a third bill that was filed, which is Senate Bill 382, and that bill speaks to our school psychologists and trying to get them to a more competitive pay rate. So those are the items that are there. In terms of the state board budget, our request was $72 million, and with the $72 million, that would be for the biennium, and our estimate for the full school support position needs was $688 million. So at $72 million, estimating that we would see continued growth with the student population, that would be a 9 to 10 year rollout to get us to the national recommended ratios. So,
and those recommended ratios are at our planning session in Durham. We were talking about $670 million.
That's correct.
Inclusive, and it'll be a moving target. That as we chase that number, it will get bigger because It sounds like at least if all of these bills went through and went through the budget bill, there's some progress going to be made in those areas. Am I?
It would be great if we do see this. These are, certainly these are bills that are being filed, and what ends up coming out, it will certainly take some time to tell. But I'm thankful to see that a lot of the state board's priorities are included in the bills that we've talked about. So I will hit pause and see if there are any questions, and if not, I'll have just a couple of closing comments.
Any question, Ms. Godwin?
Okay, I feel like I need to speak on the Bill 580 because I kind of got dragged into it yesterday. It's all in the hook, and I'm very fearful that our teachers are going to read the headline that teachers are going to be given $400. That hook makes it sound as if it's new money and it's over and beyond what they already get. I was hooked at first, and then I did more research and realized that it was just a reallocation of funding. How does that impact teachers? Well, right now, the budget is $30.12 per student for instructional supplies, instructional materials, and equipment. I have a class of 24 this year, so that's roughly $700 and some odd dollars that I'm supposed to receive for my children to last me through the year. That in itself is laughable. It's inexcusable. You cannot run a classroom for 24 kids and provide for them what they need with that kind of money. So I advocated all last year and into this year for there to be an increase in funding. And that's what I thought I was getting. I thought they had listened, and they didn't. And so when I realized that it wasn't what I thought it was, I did step away. And I did let them know the night before that I had stepped away. And so I'm sorry that I caused a problem at the press conference by my absence, but I thought that I had done my due diligence. And I apologize if I have done something that was hurtful. But I have to stand by my convictions that it's not good for teachers. It's not good for students. I talked to my principal last night, and he said if this bill goes through, it's going to be really rough because that $400, that's all you're going to get, teachers. That's what you're going to get, because the money that's left over for the administration to use for the equipment part, that's going to take up any money that they would have been able to have bought copy paper with, and toners, and bulletin board paper, and chart paper, things that we rely on for our districts to provide for us, in addition to the things in our individual classrooms. And so I'm scared. I'm a little scared that this bill could pass and that it's going to be even worse than what we're dealing with now. So I just want to make sure that we don't get caught on the hook, and that teachers are listening to what I'm saying today. And they need to really evaluate how it's going to affect them personally and their districts personally, and then go from there and advocate the way they see fit. And again, I'm sorry that I brought any type of controversy on this board or on my leaders. I would never do that, but I did have to stand on my convictions. Thank you.
And I'll respond because there are absolutely no hard feelings about the press conference yesterday. I understand where there was the misunderstanding, and I have no hard feelings whatsoever. I think there's been a lot of misinformation about this bill put out there. I think $400 for every teacher is a good thing, and that's why this bill is doing that. It is using money that already goes to districts because it is not tied to the budget. While this bill is moving through the House and the Senate, there are also budget negotiations going on, which I'm a part of. So I'll leave it at that, but I want you to know I'm not going to do things that are bad for teachers. When I wake up every morning, I think, what is the best thing that I can do today for students? And the best thing I can do that day often involves what's the best thing I can do for teachers. And giving teachers that $400 so that they can go and buy what their class needs when they need it is the best thing right now, while I'm working with the General Assembly on how much money gets to districts for classroom supplies. I know from when I was in the classroom before the Great Recession. All these numbers we talk about, I was there before the Great Recession. I still had to wait for my classroom supply list. Never got it from my classroom supply from my school. Went out and bought my own supplies, just like people are now. So we're trying to find innovative solutions to help make that not something that teachers have to worry about. This $400 is a very quick way for teachers to do that. Again, we addressed yesterday at the press conference, this is new. This is new to everyone. And I expect that we will have a bumpy start. I would fully expect that a kindergarten teacher is going to need more than, I'll be quite frank, I was an earth science teacher, than an earth science teacher in 9th grade. We do not have the luxury right now of knowing what those numbers are, but this tool, this app, is going to give us that information. By seeing what teachers go and spend their money on, we will be able to know directly what the needs are in the classroom. So I'm very excited about this. I've gotten a lot of concerns from a lot of people, and the one thing I can say is this is a process. Right now we have a very exciting bill that is in front of the General Assembly, and that goes in tandem with the budget negotiations that are going on right now too.
Are you saying that the budget, that this bill would not pass unless there's new money?
No, I'm saying this bill is a bill. It's not in the budget because we all know that this is going to be likely a very long session. But for anyone listening, that means we have the House is going to come out with their budget, the Senate is going to respond with their budget, the governor's already had his budget, and somehow those three parts of government are going to have to come to some kind of agreement. And we're not just talking about education spending. I mean, we already have a lot of plans for school construction. We have a pay-as-you-go. We have a $2 billion bond. We got a $4 billion bond. They're going to have to come to agreement on that. We also know one of the big topics is going to be health care. They're going to have to come to an agreement. There's no longer a Republican supermajority. So we are expecting that this budget negotiation process is going to take months. And we might not see the end of it until possibly September, October. I know, JB, you had a record-breaking year one year, and luckily we have a mechanism in place now where government will keep going, but we do expect this to be a long process. So this bill is not tied to the budget.
Dr. Oxendine.
Yes, just a quick question. Is the state appropriation the only stream of funds for instructional supplies, for instance? Well, my question is this: can school systems receive instructional supplies through their local?
Yes, school systems also use local funding for school supplies.
So it isn't the only stream.
It's not. It's an important. No, make no mistake. It's an important stream.
Of course,
but it's not. It's not the only.
It never has been. I mean, I do want to acknowledge that there never was a panacea when before the recession, with all the cuts during those years. There were still challenges.
Yes,
and
absolutely.
You know, I watched my brother do it over the years. I just know we accelerated it and we doubled and tripled it. But what I hear you saying is that you believe there will be new money in the budget bill for this. You said that there was a process and you were at that table.
I have requested new money, and this board has requested new money, and those conversations are ongoing.
Mr. Duncan.
Because the board did not know about the bill before it was filed, I have 2 or 3 questions about it. One of them is, and I think Mr. McDevitt asked this, but I'm not sure I understood it. As I tried to do the math in my head, and the reason I was asking for some of the total numbers was so I could do the math in my head. It doesn't sound like locally hired teachers are part of the $400 award.
They are.
Okay. Then I'm not doing the math right in my head, but so it would all locally and state hired teachers would receive the $400.
Yes.
And what would be, under the current allocations, what would be, after the $400 was distributed to all local and state, what would be the remaining allocation that would be left to be divided among the districts all over the state for the equipment and other needs?
I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. I think it's about 37 million would cover the $400, and that would leave about over 10 for
So it would be 10 million divided among the 115
86,000 per
districts,
all across the board.
Right, and some would get more and some would get less, I assume, depending upon the ADM within the district.
And one of the biggest concerns I've heard about is copy paper, because we hear you buy copy paper by the truckload, copy paper by the truckload. Again, that is personal to me because I vividly remember not having copy paper and having to go to, Classroom Central well, probably. I went to Classroom Central often and got copy paper, bought my own copy paper, and also did my own search as I was researching what this would mean for a teacher, and am having those conversations with superintendents, what their actual bulk purchasing power is for copy paper. But it's not $50 a box for copy paper. There are options for $20 for a whole box of copy paper. That $400 can go a long way. Not saying it's enough, but want to encourage that we have looked into this and researched it as well.
Ms. Godwin?
Well, it's not just about the copy paper, it's the copy clicks. It's about the clicks. They have to rent these copiers, and for every click that a teacher makes, you pay. You pay for those clicks. And so that's a huge price right there, just to pay for the copiers, not just the paper, but the copiers, and then the toner and the service and all that goes along with it. So that's also a concern.
That's right.
The Memeos, the smart boards, the technology that a lot of our schools are trying to build up and buy, that comes out of that money because it's equipment money. So there's a lot more than just copy paper that is going to be a concern.
You're exactly right, and that's why when you said for your classroom, for example, while there's $700 dedicated to your needs in your classroom, that's why the bill did not contemplate giving teachers all $700. That's why it's at $400.
Mr. Wallace, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I would. Just wanted to. Yes, sir. I just wanted to make sure we echo that districts and administrators, when we get that, you can actually get bargain deals when you collectively go to a vendor and you pool your monies. And that's what the district does before it even gets to us. So that needs to be considered, because once it goes individually out, you don't have that collective bargaining power to be able to bring those prices down. And you have your $411, which is instructional supplies, and you have 462, you have 461, which is software, then you have computers, and all that is designed at the district level with the biggest monies. If that is down low, it's going to be very hard for us to even be able to provide for the teachers at that time. Even though it is honorable trying to get the money into the teachers' pockets. I do understand that. But I do want that to be thought about as we go through that long process, as you said earlier, that collective bargaining that the districts do, and then principals on a wholesale rate with his or her teachers. So.
Other comments? Ms. Willoughby.
Just one last thing. I think this is a prime example of why we have advisors at this board table, why we have 13 members of the state board at this table. Our varied experiences, and I'm sorry Dr. Mason isn't here today, but we have our principal, our teachers. I do miss the students, but a lot of times we make better decisions when we talk about things collectively before something just gets rolled out. And this is another case, I think, that we might make a better decision about how to move forward with something. There's not a person at this table who doesn't want teachers to have money to buy instructional supplies. Not one person in this room or in this building or in this state. But how we go about it and what we, taken away from, my dad was a Methodist minister. He used to talk about robbing Peter to pay Paul. That's kind of an example here of how we're, and a sweeping statement to our superintendents and our local boards that, the money was misspent is not, that's not fair to them without some input into how they're spending that money. So I would just, say moving forward, working collaboratively works better than just, taking off and doing something that individually we might think is a good idea, but could be improved if we have discussion like this and we ask our teachers of the year, our principal of the year, our superintendent of the year for input.
Yeah, no, definitely, it was never implied that the state board was behind this or even supportive of it. I mean, this was an effort by the General Assembly, and I encourage that effort, and I'm proud to support that effort. I'm excited about Class Wallet. I'm excited about the $400 for teachers. I'm disappointed that people are using the term shell game. I'm disappointed that people are using the term rob Peter to pay Paul, because I'm in the budget conversations about what kind of classroom supply funds we'll be looking at for the next budget cycle. And it's a shame that people just jump to conclusions. And that I know it's part of what happens in Raleigh, but I trust that we'll be having a different conversation come the summer.
I hope so.
Yeah, I'm grateful for our legislators who have now shined the clear light on the desperate needs of our teachers in districts in this area. That, if nothing else, that's what this bill has done. It's exposed how our districts are starving for resources, all the way down to our teachers. And so I commend our legislators for being willing to acknowledge that and work on a solution that can address those needs. And like Ms. Willoughby, I believe that through collaboration we can come up with better solutions, and that's why this board seeks an opportunity to partner with the General Assembly. And I think, Ms. Holden, largely due to your efforts and various members of this board, our partnership with the General Assembly has increased dramatically over the last few months. And I'm confident that that will continue to grow. I want bills to work. I want bills to be supported by our teachers and by across all parties. I want bills that will help our students get a better education, and I think we can achieve that by working together. So, Dr. Oxendine.
And I want to say here to that, because I think it is very important that that the General Assembly focus on, place a bright light on the needs of the classroom teacher, the instructional needs in that classroom. So if something like that is coming out of this initiative, here, let's just go forward with those kind of requests and those kind of initiatives to put forward to the General Assembly. And I know it's a novel idea, and I'm sure that teachers and school systems and the state board and the General Assembly will learn from it. I'm kind of interested in knowing more about the app. I think you mentioned something about an app. Is it called Wallet? Is that the name of it? Mm-hmm. And so teachers will have access to that? Is that the mechanism for purchasing?
Just kind of like, I don't know, Dr. Oxendine, if you use Venmo, but it's an electronic app on your phone, and if teachers go and buy supplies in August, they will be able to take a picture of the receipt, and that money will be reimbursed to them within 2 or 3 days. If they save that money throughout the school year, they'll actually be able to use it to buy things online as they go.
Mr. Chairman, two things. One, it's not novel. We did it in 2001.
Oh, well, that's going to be corrected.
We just did it with new money.
Yeah.
Number two, I'm a little uncomfortable talking about an app that I don't know anything about, that someone may stand to be profiting from. We are not standing by or supporting, or just to be clear, I trust you've done your due diligence, but I don't want to be giving a platform to a product that I don't know anything about. So I'm a little concerned with that.
We don't have to talk about the app here.
So it was tried when, JB?
There was
new money.
There was new money. I think in 2001 it was about $200 in new supply money for teachers directly. We had a little problem because we got word they might be taxed on it, so we had to figure out how to do that. But there are tax implications, but it was new money.
This one has the same question.
So I do think this notion of dollars that can go direct with teachers if we can deal with the tax implications is a great thing. I just would hope,
I think it is,
given
too.
all the feedback we've received, we wouldn't do it in a way that would undermine them.
It is. It is a good idea.
Mr. McKinney?
And I just wanted to echo that sentiment, and that's what Lisa and I are, obviously, from a teacher perspective, we would welcome. That's what we've been asking for, is increased funding. But I also wanted to bring up the point that this has nothing to do with the fact that we're not willing to work with legislators, or that we both of us have, and with the help of Mrs. Holden, have done a lot of great work, very beneficial, very positive work. This has to do precisely with just this, and our fear that if we take away that buying power that you were talking about, Mr. Wallace, and that I think the repercussions are going to be felt in January, and when we're now adding another burden, which is pooling our resources together to get the things that normally our districts would supply for us. And also, I think there are ramifications at local districts and staffing in the finance departments. If now we're limiting, now we have this amount of money, which has been drastically reduced by almost three-fourths, how that could also impact local. I mean, there's so many implications to this that we just really trying to bring to light, and I want to say that I'm sorry that a lot of it fell on your shoulders. So I'm here in solidarity with you, and so. But again, we welcome the opportunity to work on things like this, and hope again, like Mr. McDevitt was saying, that this is a board of collaboration on issues like this, and an advisory position. So we want that. We really do.
And we welcome that. Thank you for the comments. Ms. Holden, any other?
I'd like to end on a light note, if I might. Yes. I'm going to take us back to the student, and that student that I'll speak specifically to. First, I'm going to ask, did the 2 students today skip school? Do we know if they skipped school to be here?
You need a permission slip?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
I think it was an excused absence.
Exactly. And, Greer pointed out he is an intern in the State Board office, and he's been a tremendous help with him and Ann Murtha. And then the superintendent's legislative team were able to maneuver the waters across the way in a good way. I thought that Greer joined me as an intern because he really wanted the experience, but in the hallway I ran into his grandmother, and she informed me that he would do anything to get out of Calculus 2. That's why he's here. He does get class credit through us, but he wanted to skip out not just school today, but also Calculus 2 for the semester. And then I'll end by the Wake Forest comment that Mr. Jenkins, I believe, pointed out earlier. What Greer did not share with you, because he's probably too humble, but I'm a proud kind of sort of parent, whatever. I'll share with you that he not only is a Moorhead scholar, but he was offered a full scholarship to Wake Forest as well. Oh. So that's a big deal.
It really hurt his dad.
It hurt his dad, and it hurt my dad in heaven, because he was also a teacher. So I tried to convince, but as you can tell, Greer is not able to move away from his center. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Holden. I'll now turn to the superintendent for your report to the board.
Thank you. Not as much traveling going on, because I've obviously been in Raleigh a lot. Been a lot of work going on in Raleigh. We did celebrate, as the state board did. The last month was NC Music Month. It was actually arts in all schools. Actually had some great times. Went there on a number of occasions, over to the state capitol, and heard some beautiful, beautiful singing. And it's such an amazing place to have that. We actually we alerted the governor that we were there one day, and he happened to be there, so he came out. But then, of course, everybody was just really excited about Miss America. Nia Franklin joined us, and she actually, her talent is singing, so this is very important to her, and she is around telling the importance, as we do, of arts in schools, and that it's not just about the enrichment, it's also really a foundational part of education. The thing I love most about arts is when you engage in the arts, whether it's singing or visual arts or drawing, you're really using another part of the brain. And when you open up that other part of the brain, it helps you do better on the academic side as well. And I always tell students that we're so proud of them, because this is a skill that they'll take with them for their entire lives, whether they do it through church or a community organization or just as a hobby. This is something they can take with them forever. And then we had Dr. Oates here earlier. We went and visited him at Town Creek Elementary in Brunswick County to see where they are 6 months after the storm. and it is an amazing story. This is the part of Brunswick County where on a highway you have the emergency signs that go up and over the highway. The water was so high that when they were on boats over the highway, they had to duck down to get under those signs. So luckily, again, flooding-wise, most of our schools were spared, but the real damage we suffered was from roofs peeling back and water getting in. When the power was out, we got a lot of mold. So there was a lot of work to be done to get that school back in shape. And we just always enjoy visiting and letting students know there are lots of people around North Carolina that care very much for them. And also now, 6 months out, we were able to ask them how they feel, how they are back to normal, almost back to normal. How is it that they feel? And of course, we always enjoy, as Dr. Ward pointed out, giving out books. Giving out books is such a great thing. And we are actually to the point where we're pretty much out of books that were donated. We worked so hard to get them out over the holidays. I want to thank especially Wolfpack Works. This is where Wolfpack works. They're doing the work out in the schools, but they also came by the textbook warehouse, and no fancy media visits or press announcements that we're coming to give out books. Wolfpack Works just went, they got books, and counties, Duplin County, Sampson County, we got books out in those schools, and those are children that lost everything in their homes, and now they've got brand new books as well. So thank you so much to organizations like First Book that helped us get those books, but then also Wolfpack Works helping us get those out. A very important conference goes on once a year. It's Connecting Communities of Education Stakeholders. Thank you to Maria Peachamartin and her team. Such a large endeavor. Dr. Ellaby was very key in this as well. Such a large endeavor, but we get educators from across the entire state in one place, and we talk about things that are working and where we're going. And obviously, for the past 2 years, we've really been talking a lot about innovation. You saw it yesterday in the digital learning programs. Personalized learning is going to unlock amazing things for our schools. And the big focus of this was personalized learning and helping teachers understand what that is and how they can bring it to their learning environments as well. And it couldn't help, you should all take the elevator down to the basement and see the industrial shredder we have, because we are working hard and we are cleaning up DPI. And it is such a good feeling. Thank you to Katherine Johnston, her team, for leading this. We got to a point in this building, and I won't go into the details. We know how we got here. But we got to a point where we had conference rooms that we couldn't have conference meetings in because they were just being used for storage of stuff. Stuff, and that's the nice word for it. Just stuff that we just did not need to have in this building. You know, binders from professional development presentations given 20 years ago. And just, we didn't have a records retention policy, which, departments need to have record retention policy. It doesn't mean you have to keep every single thing that has ever been done in this department. So once we identified what we don't need, we've been operating that shredder 5 days a week, and it's still going. So you can see the giant bags. Those get cleared out, and we fill up more giant bags. But it's just another important step. We've also been moving offices, and I really want to thank the DPI team for being so bought into that process. I know, and I said this last year when we said we were going to move offices. I know it is one of those things that sounds easy, but it's very difficult, because you start to realize not just the physical part of the move, but you're actually moving to another office, and that really changes where you are in the orientation of the building. Quite frankly, it might not be a better office than where you were. That is a reality too. But it's important because we are taking this effort and we are putting groups of people who work together next to each other. So we have a plan for DPI so that we actually have teams together, and that's how we best collaborate and innovate, and it makes us more efficient. So again, just a huge thank you to the DPI team. This is very exciting, and what we're doing now will have a long-lasting impact for years to come. And I thank you very much for your efforts. And that's it.
Thank you, Superintendent. Any questions, Ms. Willoughby?
Just one. We talked a little bit while ago about the student advisors and missing those for the last 2 years. What's the plan to fill that?
Yeah. The student advisors. So that was held up by the lawsuit. The law that I believe it was the governor who originally appointed student advisors.
That's correct.
And for some reason, that was changed to the state superintendent. That was just changed in that law in December of 2016. That entire law was put on hold for 1.5 years because of the lawsuit, so nobody could appoint a student advisor. When the court proceedings were finally finished in summer of 2018, that is when it took the restraining order off of that law, and I had the ability to appoint a student advisor. I started going through that process, but then unfortunately, and we even talked in September last year, we sometimes have tough discussions here at this board. We had an embarrassing state board meeting in September of last year. I have had multiple people come up to me and say that it was not our finest moment, and it truly wasn't. And we have a lot of board members who weren't here, but it was not one of the finer moments in the history of the board, in the office of the superintendent, in the department itself. There were times where people were in very awkward circumstances. It was times where it was not pleasant, and it was not us at our best. So after that happened, I stopped that process because I do believe it's very important to hear from students. But I think one of the students even said, I take in my notes, being part of a team is important. Working with others is important. I will say that was the last time we had a board meeting like that. I'm very grateful. I think part of that is the hurricane hit, and I think we put all that aside and came together and said, we've got to be together. We have got to move forward. We cannot have this happen. It has not happened since, and I'm very happy about that, and I think we can start looking to next school year. One of the recommendations that I absolutely love from Mr. Cyrus, actually, was a student advisory panel. I think, yes, we can look at getting the 2 student advisors on, but I think the board itself could start a student advisory panel. You could get multiple students. They could sit around this, have their own meeting, have reactions, have feedback to the board. But that is something that I will start looking at, having student advisors again, now that it feels like we're not on track to have one of those meetings again for next school year.
Yes, that's a great idea, Superintendent. And what I would recommend is that if you pull together an advisory board or council made up of students, that board reflect the 8 state board regions.
I think so. I think that I had not had that idea before. Thank you to Deanna and Chairman Davis for having them come in and give recommendations. I think a student advisory panel is very powerful.
We would certainly
and
get
you could then, instead of just diversity. 2, you have a junior and senior. You could actually get more diversity and more diverse perspectives on it.
I vote for that.
Superintendent, is there anything inhibiting filling those 2 student advisory seats? Anything you need from the board to get that done so that all of us can benefit from having those 2 students on board?
As I said, I just wanted to make sure that our board meetings were not going to devolve into what had happened in September, and I feel confident that's not going to happen. So now with the end of this school year coming up, I think we can start that process for next school year for having those student advisors.
Superintendent, I'd remind you that one of those students also said that, reminded us that those tough decisions are okay. Tough discussions were okay, and it was a student who said that, and I'm not sure about September or October or whatever. I do believe this table is a place where we have to do the hard work.
I agree.
Hard work, and it's not always easy. It's on the anvil of figuring it all out together that we end up with something that ends up moving it down the road. But I'm not sure I see the relationship between any particular meeting and appointing these 2 student advisors. One is supposed to be a junior and one a senior, and I just think having that perspective is there. But I also think that what was refreshing is to hear that these we're okay to hearing the tough discussion. We're okay participating in tough discussions. So I think it's okay.
Okay. All right, let's take a 10-minute break, and I'll tell you, be back at 11:30. Recess till 11:30. Mr. Wallace?
Yes, before we, well, we're not all back yet. But before we get started, before y'all get started on the voting piece,
yes.
We have an announcement today. Dr. Oxendine just turned 21 this morning. And I think it's only right and thorough that a happy birthday is stated today.
Actually, I don't know who's going to start this, but we ought to sing happy birthday. Let's stand. Reggie.
All right.
Go. Floor's yours.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Olivia. Happy birthday to you.
Okay, I'll leave. I just love it. Thank you so much. I have finally turned 27.
Looking good.
I do have two. I'm sorry. I'm getting ahead of
It's the floor is yours, Dr. Oxendine. It's your day. Yes, your
I
day.
really do have two other little announcements that I'd like to make. Actually, today is my birthday, but it's also the birthday of my namesake. She is 1 year old. She's 1 year old today, and she was born at 11:37 on April 4th last year. Wow, cool. And her name is Olivia. Oh. So someday she's in Florida, but someday, who knows, she may be serving on the North Carolina State.
That child has a bright future. No doubt.
She really does. And then I'd also like to recognize Mr. Wallace, Tabari Wallace. He accepted my invitation a couple of months ago to come to UNC Pembroke, and he spoke to the MSA interns, the future principals, and he did a fantastic job. One of the statements that will always resonate with me as well as the students, he kept saying throughout the about an hour presentation, he kept saying, they said we couldn't do it, but we did it. Mm-hmm. And so I said to the students, the MSA students, just remember that statement. Mm-hmm. They said we couldn't, but we did it. So thank you ever so much for traveling to Pembroke and being part of our seminar series.
Thank you very welcome, Dr.
Yes.
Mr. Wallace.
And Dr. Oxendine, the floor is still yours for the Educator Standards and Practice Committee
Very good.
report.
Thank you so much. Olivia Oxendine. And sharing the responsibility of chairmanship of the committee is Amy White. I have on the agenda several items. The first item is the issues item, and that was presented yesterday. It's in reference to House Bill 1030, and it provides the State Board of Education an opportunity to fund three-year pilot sites, and we have several of those going on currently in North Carolina. We have before us Aaron Swanson and Dr. Catherine Edmonds. Aaron is from Edgecombe County, and Catherine is from, Dr. Edmonds is from Bertie County. They brought us up to date with all the activities going on with their pilot sites, and they proved to us that you can overcome low wealth and the problems that come with low wealth, that being recruitment, retention, and funding constraints, with some creative thinking and strong leadership. So it was just good to hear an update from those two individuals with regard to this particular initiative. The next item is a new business item, and this is the Educator Preparation Dashboard. This was presented by Dr. Andrew Seiberg, and it is called the Human Capital Dashboard, and it's to make public the report card data that is provided to the State Board of Education from our EPPs each year. Dr. Seiberg presented a timeline for the development of the dashboard, as well as a timeline for policy development, and we will act on policy sometime in the spring, probably April, May. April will probably be the discussion of that dashboard, and then we will take a vote on it in May. And so that is to come back to us next month for approval. Under action on first read, we have two items. The first item, the recommendation from the Extenuating Circumstances Committee, was dealt with in closed session yesterday, and that one request was approved by the State Board. And I want to take just a minute to recognize the individuals in the department who work very closely with that committee, and it's Nadine Azuri and also Eric Snyder. They work very hard to make the work of that advisory committee smooth and efficient. We meet about every 3 months, maybe 3 to 4 months, and we entertain the requests from teachers who need an additional year to finish their licensure requirements. So my hat's off to those two individuals and others behind the scene that make that work smoothly. Also under action on first read, we have the policy LICN 001, the licensing of out-of-state teachers. This item has come to us on several occasions for discussion and rediscussion. The information is in your material. It was a very comprehensive set of recommendations. Dr. Tomberlin presented that item to us yesterday. At the core of that item is that the State Board of Education will recognize out-of-state teachers who come to us and request a license. We will accept the license exam score of those individuals as long as that score falls within the range of the test developer approved score. So that's at the heart and soul of that item, and I'm bringing it to this. I'm recommending that this state board approve that motion. Another, under discussion, well, let me back up and say there's something else that is tagged to that particular item. At a previous board meeting, the request was made of the department to provide some information on what it would be like to operationalize comparability. And Dr. Tomberlin, the way he responded to that request was a couple of nights ago, I believe you received an email from him, and within that email he detailed all the mechanisms, all the details that would be necessary to operationalize comparability if we were to go in that direction. But that's a moot point at this time, because we're getting ready to act on another way to license out-of-state teachers. If you have any questions about that, if you recall, it's very detailed. In my mind, it might even require, I know it would require additional staff to do the almost scientific work around comparing the licensing requirements and exams of teachers who come to us from out of state. But if you have any questions that you would about that particular approach, methodology, I would recommend that you talk with Dr. Tomberlin about that. But he did comply with that request, is my point. Under discussion, we have two discussion items. The first item, amendments to LINC 001 and 003, Safety and Education License, and this was presented by Carl Logan, Reggie Flythe, I think is the way he pronounces his name, and Dr. Kim Evans. And the goal of this particular item is to work with LEAs to establish classroom and behind-the-wheel training opportunities for new teachers and those who need assistance with recertification. So this is going to comprise 134 hours of a training module. 80 hours will be coursework, and the remaining hours will be through an online platform using Canvas. So this item will come back to us next month for approval. The last item under discussion is the amendments to the CTE licensure policy and procedures manual. Very extensive revisions to that policy manual presented to us by Lee O'Neill, and it will come back to us next month for approval. I have no consent items under my agenda, and that completes my report.
Thank you, Dr. Oxendine. I now turn to Mr. Buxton, Chair of the Student Learning and Achievement Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I serve in that capacity along with Dr. Olivia Oxendine as the Vice Chair. We had a heavy new business agenda yesterday. I thought a very good report from Dr. Stephen Pruitt, President of the Southern Regional Education Board, detailing their recent study, Unprepared and Unaware, about the coming landscape of economic change, not only for 25 to 35-year-olds today, but their children, and what that will mean as we walk into an era of automation and artificial intelligence, and the kind of jobs and needs that will be present, and the kinds of things that states need to do to prepare for that workforce reality. One of the suggestions is for states to be very coordinated in ESSA, Perkins, and RIO, and the Workforce Innovation Opportunities Act. And he made that recommendation to us about how we, as we are starting to walk into our new Perkins 5 plan, how we could think about a more coordinated effort in the state. Mr. Trey Michaels followed that, our Director of CTE, about our Perkins plan, our transition plan for this year, which we do not approve, but the governor will sign, and then the coming process for us to get to a Perkins plan that we will approve, and that's in the coming year. And Trey, Mr. Michaels walked through some of the specific issues around comprehensive needs assessment, the concentrator definitions, and our course pathways, career pathways that we're putting together. Good materials in eBoard for further exploration. We did not do our response to early literacy framework. We agreed there was more work that needed to be done, so that was ready for the board's attention, and I look forward to that next month. We talked briefly about the college and career-ready graduate update, and just the skinny there is we will have a meeting in the next 2 weeks with the community colleges to talk through kind of getting unstuck from where we are right now to get that legislation implementation done, that work, and I'm going to represent the board at that meeting. We have 2 actions on first reading today. One, our SLA1, Committee of Practitioners Advisory Committee. This is our committee that advises the board on ESSA. There are a couple technical issues. We are reconvening that board, and Dr. Wells presented the advisory committee membership and the activities that they undertake, and we'll vote on that membership and recomposing that board today. Second, SLA2, revising standards for K-12 social studies. Dr. Beverly Vance did a nice job pinch hitting for Ms. Christy Ebert and Lynch Ebert. Again, we'll vote on this action on first read. This is just to approve the process to revise the standards, not the standards themselves, K-12 social studies. And we had some good follow-up actions that we'll look for the department to take on and some recommendations. And finally, or almost finally, 2 action items today. One, SLA3 on the elimination of grade 4 science and social studies final exam and grade 5 social studies final exam. This has been before us a couple of times for discussion before yesterday. We had some more discussion yesterday, and I would just remind the board, Dr. Howard's message that the purpose of this recommendation is to eliminate what are 3 final exams that have low student test-taking numbers, about 11,000 total for each, and very small number of teachers who need this for EVOS. We're talking about a very subscribed population or circumscribed population that's taking this. Not a lot of diagnostic information then that comes out across these grade levels around science and social studies, and so the recommendation, because of those small numbers, was made. There was good discussion, I thought, about future conversation, also dealing with how we're supporting instructional improvement in these areas, not just how we're getting rid of exams. Last, SLA4, we will vote on the State Advisory Council on Indian Education report. We heard that report last month in some detail. We had a discussion around those report recommendations, and we'll vote today to receive that report. Finally, 2 consent items. SLA5, which is the approval of the school calendar of the North Carolina residential schools for the deaf and blind. Again, that really just follows the LEA calendar in which they reside and complies with the hours requirement. And then at SLA6, around appointment for the Eastern North Carolina School for the Deaf. Ken Jones from Wilson is up for our vote in the consent item. Mr. Chairman, that.
Thank you, Mr. Buxton. And I'll turn to Ms. Kamitz, the Vice Chair of the Education, Innovation, and Charter Schools Committee.
Thank you. I am reporting today in the absence of Amy White, who chairs the committee. We had 2 fairly straightforward items this month. The first is on Anson Charter Academy, which was granted a charter to open in August 2018. Had to ask for a delay on that opening date. Had a complete turnover in their board, asked for another delay this January, and then ultimately in March decided to that they really needed to go back and restart their whole process, and so they have requested that they be allowed to relinquish their charter, and it's the expectation of the Office of Charter Schools that we will hear from them again, that they will come back to us with a new application. So that is EICS 1, and we'll be accepting that relinquished charter. And then the second action item is EICS 2, which is the proposed charter school application timeline and process. We discussed this last month, and this is our opportunity to approve that timeline.
Thank you, Ms. Kamitz. We'll now turn to Mr. Ford, Chair of the Strategic Planning Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm joined also by my Vice Chair, Ms. Jill Kamitz. Yesterday, the Strategic Planning Committee presented the most recent and updated version of our strategic plan. I took a moment to narrate some of the changes and highlight those that were worth noting. One being a change to Goal 1. The focus and orientation of that, focusing less on just mere proficiency and really starting to illuminate the closure of opportunity gaps. The prior sort of metrics were all about making certain benchmark scores, which we didn't really felt like captured the spirit of equity, which we have determined we wanted to be embedded throughout all of our goals. And then also making these goals more reflective of the whole child, so that these weren't mere ideals that we hung out at the beginning of the report, but something that was embedded throughout each goal, and collapsing this notion of safety into the notion of whole child. In addition to that, we added a new goal, goal number 3, which is to increase educator preparedness and meet the needs of every child. And in that, you see certain items. One of those that I highlighted yesterday was brought up today actually by Mr. The first young man that spoke, I forget his name. Cyrus, Mr. Cyrus. And it talked about increasing educators of color and things of that nature we discussed as a board. And so I'm very proud to add that goal. And I should pause also to mention that one of the things we're working on as a committee is being intentional about discussing and illuminating for each of the intended goals the financial lift, right, that's associated with that. That each of these goals will come as an expense, that the costs come from somewhere. And so in the nature and in the purpose of being fiscally responsible, we want to make sure we build that into our strategic planning goals. And then we also decided to take more of a focus that looked at some non-academic factors. We discussed the idea of sort of using the strategic planning document as a way of covering up what we think are some of the blind spots of the ESSA document. So capturing things like chronic absenteeism and school climate, which if you look at the comments again from Greer, you know, students have a lot to say, and so if there's a way we can build that into the plan, I think that that's increasingly good. Additionally, just want to draw a connection here from the SREB presentation you may have seen yesterday. The presentation talked a lot about equity being the center and the focus and everything being predicated on that, and the notion of breaking out data. If that's any indication, I think that we're on the right track with the way that we're approaching things as a state. And lastly, we talked a little bit about our goals for stakeholder engagement with the materials once we proceed. As it currently stands, we're still on pace to have everything ready by June the 30th. We will be revisiting this again during an issue session in the latter part of April and early May. We will be visited by the Wake County Public Schools Equity Affairs Office, who will come and present some of their work that's being done. Much of what we were talking about, the student equity teams that's coming out of their office. And then we'll also be visited by a peer in Maryland from the equity office there in the Department of Education, who will be talking about their statewide efforts to enact equity. We didn't have a whole lot of discussion, which kind of made me a little nervous, so it must have just been flawless, right? But I do want to impress upon right track. Board members to please offer input because this document, I mean, it will be guiding all of our action. I think none of us want this just to set you know, on a shelf and collect dust. We want to use this to inform all of our action. In fact, use it as a a document that provides a roadmap for how to get where we want to go as a state. And so it's of incredible consequence. So if there's any discussion or anything, please offer some input. And if not, I'll continue to keep the impression that everything is perfect.
Here's my notebook of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. And now I'll turn to Vice Chair Duncan for the Business Operations Committee report.
Thank you. Along with Todd Chastain, we lead the Business Operations Committee. We had yesterday an item for action on first reading, which was a career and technical education program expansion grant that was subject for our approval and review on first reading, and will be submitted to the legislature in the next few days. And Stacia Solomon gave us an excellent presentation on that, and I think any questions the board had were answered. We then had the update on contracts, and there was at least one contract we discussed at some length during the course of that. And as a final reminder, we had a consent item. We have a consent item, which is the certification of North Carolina LEA finance officers, which has been a regular on our consent agenda lately. And that would be our report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. And now for our final committee, I'll turn to Ms. Willoughby, Chair of our Healthy Responsible Students Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Keenan and I are responsible for this committee, and we did, this was a closed session item yesterday, and we heard that the superintendent is working on this safety app that we've been getting the monthly updates, so I'm confident we'll have a recommendation soon.
Thank you. So now, board members will move to our consent agenda, and I note to the audience that the consent agenda is primarily items that have come to the board for discussion in a prior month and are not complex in nature. I note also that board members have seen these consent agenda materials for at least a week. If there's no request to remove an item from consent, I ask for a motion to approve BizOp 2, SLA 5 and 6 on the consent agenda. Motion by Mr. Keenan. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Oxendine. Any questions on these consent items? Very well. Dr. Townsend Smith, will you call the roll to capture the vote?
Yes. Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Dr. Oxendine?
Yes.
Ms. Chemnitz?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Willoughby?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Mr. Chasteen?
Yes.
Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Treasurer Falwell? Vice Chair Duncan?
Yes.
Chair Davis?
Yes. The motion carries. So board members will now move to action and action on first read items. From your committee reports, a thorough discussion and report for each of these items was provided. I ask for a motion to approve the March 6 and 7, 2019 and March 13, 2019 conference call meeting minutes, the executive committee minutes of March 5 and 15, 2019, SLA 1 and 2 action on first reading, SLA 3 and 4 action items, BizOp 1 action on first reading, EICS 1 action on first reading, EICS 2 action, and ES&P 1 and 2 action on first reading. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Dr. Oxendine. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Willoughby. Any discussion on any of these items? Dr. Townsend Smith?
Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Dr. Oxendine?
Yes.
Ms. Chemnitz?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Willoughby?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Mr. Chasteen?
Yes.
Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Vice Chair Duncan?
Yes.
Chair Davis?
Yes. Motion carries. Thank you all to staff and presenters for this April 4th, 2019 meeting. I'll remind everyone of the planning and work session that constitutes our next meeting, which will be held April 30th to May 2nd here at DPI, so plan to arrive no later than noon on April 30th. And as most of us are aware, the governor has submitted nominations for 2 seats on this board, and so that has the slight potential that Ms. Willoughby and Mr. McDevitt will finally be released. But I wouldn't bet on it. So in the event that doesn't happen, we will look forward to seeing you again in a month. And if it does, we'll probably still see you because we'll want to say thanks.
Thank
you. You bet. And then as a final item of new business, we do have an item concerning a proposed rule, but I am going to pause on bringing that item to the board at this time. This past Monday, the superintendent, vice chair, and I had a really productive meeting, and this item was hardly discussed, not sufficiently discussed, and we'd like to provide an opportunity for the general counsel and Mr. Sink to collaborate on that item. So we want to pause on this and then bring it to the superintendent, vice chair, and myself for discussion before it comes to the board. We want to demonstrate our desire to really collaborate and come up with good solutions as opposed to maybe talking about how the General Assembly doesn't do it. Well, we want to practice our own. We don't eat our own cooking, okay? Also, a great outcome of that meeting was a commitment that the Vice Chair, myself, and Superintendent would start conducting bi-weekly meetings, the first one of which is scheduled for April 12th. I think this is a great way to promote more dialogue and collaboration between the three of us that we hope will influence not only the rest of the board, but also staff here in a very positive way. So more to come on those items, but that constitutes essentially our new business items, unless any board member has a new business item to bring forward. Seeing none, and since we've already sang happy birthday to Dr. Oxendine.
I'm a birthday girl, so I can.
One more shot.
I have one more shot at this. Please enjoy birthday cake with me in the lounge. Is that my birthday cake? I don't want to offer it. You go ahead.
You know,
I'm taking advantage of this day, y'all.
Dr. Oxendine, I think maybe the best present we could have given you today was that successful passing of LC 001 out of state.
You heard my strong motion, right?
Yes, we did.
Thank you.
I now seek a motion to adjourn. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Buxton. Is there a second by Mr. McDevitt? Assuming no discussion, Dr. Townsend Smith.
Mr. Buxton?
Yes.
Dr. Oxendine?
Yes.
Ms. Kimmons?
Yes.
Mr. Keenan?
Yes.
Ms. Willoughby?
Yes.
Mr. McDevitt?
Yes.
Mr. Chastain?
Yes.
Mr. Ford?
Yes.
Vice Chair Duncan?
Yes.
Chair Davis?
Yes, we are adjourned. See you May 30th.
April 3rd.